Welcome to Your Vote on YourTV. I'm Jay Amer. I'm your host for a series of interviews with the candidates running in Peterborough-Kawartha riding, and it's my pleasure to welcome to our off-site studio Shantae White with the Green Party.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, Shantae, it's great to have you here, and it's been probably a busy few weeks for you. We're not too far away from the election, but I just wanted to have a chance to ask you a few questions. Let our audience learn a little bit more about you, because you're a relative newcomer to politics and to the public spotlight, I guess, in Peterborough. But just tell us about yourself, your connection to the Peterborough-Kawartha riding, and why you want to be our Member of Parliament. That should fill our 15 minutes.
Yes, so I first came to Peterborough in 2012 when I started at Trent University, but my passion for the environment and politics started before then. My whole life I've grown up immersed in nature. My sister and I would always go to the parks and things like that, really connecting to nature. But it was in 2016 when my partner and I went to Mexico that we truly got a grip of what climate change is and how much it impacts lives. On the 7th day of our travels, we realized that there was a Category 3 hurricane coming to the location where we were at. So the following 3 days of the trip, we were displaced. We had no running water, no electricity, no food. Fortunately, we escaped this incident unscathed, but many people didn't have that opportunity, and they were left in those conditions for quite some time. So since I came back from that trip, I really put into focus how much I want to influence change in the climate as well as in Canada.
And Trent University, is that what you majored in? Was it environmental studies?
Yes, so I majored in environmental studies and I minored in political studies.
Oh, well, that kind of makes sense. You're running for the Green Party. And it's interesting you mention that, because we've seen hurricanes and the impacts coming closer and closer, just recently even in New Jersey, New York, which is not too far from where we are. So it's certainly something we need to be aware of.
Exactly.
Just want to shift to your campaign team. Tell us a bit about who your campaign manager is, who are the members of your party involved with the campaign that you're working with on a regular basis.
So I have quite a few people that keep this machine running. So Jen is one of my campaign managers. It's a bit of a shared role between her, Rob Davis, as well as my partner Andrew Boitin. So together, they're sort of what the people behind me that keep me strong and encouraged going through this journey. We've been very fortunate that all of the people that we've encountered so far have been very polite and encouraging, and even if they had differences in political opinion, they still were willing to talk to us, which was very encouraging.
And that would be Jean Broughton, who was a candidate 2 years ago, although it seems like 5.
Yes.
Is that who you're referring to?
Yes, definitely.
Yes, certainly. I remember her from our in-studio forums and debates. Now, this question might be, you might have answered it already, but I'm going to ask it. What are you most passionate about in your party's national platform? Now, I know your party might not have released the platform fully by the time we do this interview, but what are you most passionate about? And if you want to expand on the climate change issue, that's certainly something I would think you might want to do.
Yeah, so our full platform was actually released earlier today. So the main aspect that connects mostly to my campaign would definitely be climate change. It's the driving force, I feel like, in a lot of things these days. Climate change affects all different industries. And I feel like our plan is the strongest. We're the only party that has a concrete plan with real emissions targets. One of the ideas in our climate plan is to retrofit all buildings in Canada. That would help bring jobs to local areas. It would also help strengthen the transition to a clean, green economy. These are all things that Canadians want and have been asking for, and our party is ready to make a change.
So moving from climate change, and I want to talk about local issues. What, besides climate change and the impact it could have on our community, what's the most important issue locally in Peterborough-Kawartha's riding that concerns you?
It's hard to limit that to just one issue. One of the most prevalent in my campaign thus far has definitely been the boil water advisories that are most prevalent in one of the reserves in our riding, Curve Lake. The people have been calling for fresh water for many years. You know, if you're ashamed of what was done to Indigenous peoples 50 years ago, you should definitely be embarrassed by what's going on today. That's why my campaign has called on MP Monsef as well as Justin Trudeau to drink the water from the Curve Lake Reserve, because if it's not good enough for them, why are we giving it to children to drink?
Now, I do want to ask you about that, and you brought it up. Some people look at that, okay, is this just an attention getter, a bit of a publicity stunt? Long-standing water issues, various First Nations, there's some things are happening to help improve that. What can the federal government do, and what would the Green Party do so that you could drink that water along with your colleague candidates?
Yeah, so like you said, it has been called a publicity stunt. But I think bringing attention to the needs of residents in our riding is not something that I'm doing for publicity. Of course, I want it to be a prevalent topic on the ballot this election, but I think it's something that we should be talking about daily anyways. The Greens would invest more money into the people of the band councils who can make these regulations and these changes. Getting the infrastructure in there so that we can get fresh water out of the taps would definitely be the first start.
Now, I'm just going to skip gears here and ask you a question out of the sky. What's something about you that you can tell our audience you haven't told the newspaper audience or in your campaign? What's something about yourself that's an interesting fact that you'd like to share with us? And I'm doing this in the middle of the interview rather than the end. So,
an interesting fact. I practiced competitive dance for like 12 years.
That's good.
So the arts are definitely a large part of my life. So that's why I'm looking forward to the arts debate coming up in a couple days as well.
Right, that's right. Okay, good. Well, that's good. You did, on the spot, you came up with a good answer. Now, again, I like to ask people why you joined the party you joined. Obviously, other parties have a green approach or claim to have a green approach. Some of them do. But what compelled you to get involved with the Green Party? Was it just a natural fit? Was it just the opportunity arose? Have you been an active Green Party member before this election?
I'd say a bit of all of those things. The opportunity, presented itself to me, and I'm at a great position in my life where I can dedicate the time to service the people of the community. As well, the green values really closely aligned with all of the things that I value and hold in high regard, so it was only a natural fit.
Why should the voters in this riding elect you to be our next member of parliament?
I bring a fresh attitude and a new face to politics. I've lived in Peterborough for over 8 years. I love the community here. I find myself to be a very active member of the community as well. I also bring with me a younger perspective. My generation is full of hope. That's one of the reasons why I ran as a Green, because I'm hopeful that Green MPs can put forth the changes that we need to see and not leave any Canadians behind.
And I want to ask about going door to door. This is your first campaign, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Are you knocking on doors?
Of course.
And what kind of reception are you getting? What's the top issue you're hearing from people at the door?
I'd say the top issue that I am faced most with was probably housing. Housing is a very big issue here in Peterborough, whether it's affordability or just finding a good location for a house. That's another areas where the Greens are very strong.
Talking about leadership, now the Green Party has a tumultuous journey to get to this point. I think things have settled down now with enemy Paul, but there seemed to be a bit of a revolt going on inside, and she's been under a lot of pressure as your leader from the inside, but also, you mentioned the platform's just come out recently, and we're, a couple of weeks maybe or less from an election. By the time people watch this, it'll be probably a week away. But tell me why she would be the best choice for the leadership and to be Prime Minister of Canada if she were to be elected.
Yeah, so Anna May Paul is unlike the other leaders of the parties. Two of the leaders from the parties are from political families, so they're coming from wealth. Anna May is coming from a totally different background. She was a lawyer and human rights activist. She's somebody who has shown and proven that she is resilient in the face of challenges. I think that would be a really nice change to bring to politics.
It's interesting, typically you ask, how much engagement have you had with the leader, and I've read that the Green Party leader hasn't left Toronto, but in the pandemic era, that might not matter because we communicate using other technologies. But have you had a chance to actually engage with the leader of the Green Party?
Yes, actually, before I put forth my application to run, I had a very long conversation with her regarding some of the issues that I might face on the campaign trail, some advice that she would have for me, and she was very encouraging and definitely was one of the voices in my ear the loudest telling me that I should do this.
Now, were you just waiting for this opportunity to come out? Had you thought about it before this snap election was called, or was it something? I'm trying to think back. I think you were actually nominated back in April, now that I think about it, right? Is that correct?
Around there, yes.
Okay, so you were getting prepared for the next election, whenever it might be. But it's interesting you say you came from, and by the way, a lot of people go to Trent, take things that have absolutely nothing to do with what they end up doing in Peterborough, as you may know. We've got a 60-year history of that. But politics and environment, I mean, you picked one that's aligning nicely with what you're looking to do. But tell us, just back to Anna May, what quality you mentioned a few of the strengths she has, but what quality about her do you like the most? What's most appealing?
I would definitely have to say her tenacity and her drive. This is not her first venture into politics. She's been doing this for a while. And just her willingness to continue, even at the face of adversity, that was definitely something that was speaking to me.
Yeah. And I mentioned we've seen other leaders or other cabinet ministers, I guess, for the existing party come through here. Do you have any support from other people in the party coming to support your campaign?
Yes, so Andrew McGregor, who previously ran in 2019, again was one of the people who encouraged me to go for this. He's one of my strongest and loudest cheerleaders, and I'm really appreciative for his support.
Great. Well, I remember having Andrew on our show as well. So, and you always wonder, where is he now? But that is a question I'm going to ask you as well. Okay, here's what I'm going to ask. Why do we need a federal election at this time, if we need one?
I don't think that we do. I think it was completely unnecessary for Prime Minister Trudeau to call an election at a time like this. I mean, look at what's happening right now in Afghanistan. Prior to that, we have a pandemic that we're dealing with. I think he's putting a lot of Canadian lives at risk by calling an election right now. I know a Green government would definitely not have called an election in the middle of a pandemic.
And pandemic, speaking of that, what are your thoughts on how the current government or the most recent government has handled itself in the pandemic? Is there something they could have done better to keep people safe, to keep the economy going, in your opinion?
Yeah, I definitely think that we could have followed the recommendations of the SARS information that had come out. The fact that we were lacking in PPE is extremely unacceptable. The fact that there were nurses going to work with garbage bags as opposed to regular PPE is just quite embarrassing, I believe. Now,
if you're not elected, and the polls show the Green Party has still got a long way to go, but making some inroads there. But if you're not elected locally, what's the next chapter for you, for Shante White's story in politics and in Peterborough?
Sorry. I'm not sure what's next for me. I definitely know that this is not the last that you'll see of me in politics. I have great aspirations and goals, and I know that this is only the beginning for me. Regardless of how this election turns out, I'm dedicated to working for the residents of Peterborough-Kawartha, and I'm just grateful for this opportunity to do that.
Okay, and one last question. Of course, I wish you all the best going forward, but if a year from now there's a civic election, what ward would you run in if you were a councillor?
Don't want to let you know just yet.
So I'm trying to get that out of you. Actually, what ward do you live in? But we'll see. Yeah, I'm getting too far ahead. But that's great. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to come and meet our audience. They haven't seen us for a while. We've been on the air doing this show for many, many years. It's always a pleasure to welcome new people into our studio. And our studio happens to be at Venture North in Peterborough because we're waiting for some rentals and some equipment to come in. But I want to thank you. I wish you all the best on the campaign trail, and hopefully we'll meet again in future.
Thank you.
Welcome to Your Vote on YourTV. I'm Jay Amer, and I'm here with candidate Joy La Chica from the NDP party, the New Democratic Party of Canada. And Joy, it's a pleasure to have you in our remote studio, and you're running for the NDP, and great opportunity to learn more about you here today, I hope.
Well, thank you so much, Jay. It's wonderful to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity very much.
We know you're busy on the campaign trail in this tight election window we've got. You're a teacher, a union rep with the ETFO. You were at one time the president.
Lots of letters. Yes. These acronyms, they're hard to keep up with.
You know what? I was thinking, is it OECTA? No, that's the other one. But
right.
But
so the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario are the 83,000 members across Ontario. And I have been elected to that board for 2 terms. I just recently resigned because of this campaign and making it a priority, but I've certainly been fighting for families, for education workers, and for students across Ontario, and also have been a delegate to the Canadian Teachers Federation. So there's provincial, but there's also a porous overlap to federal issues that impact education, especially truth and reconciliation. Yeah. So that's an important piece to me in this campaign.
Well, and it's certainly top of mind for a lot of people, and even though we're taping today, we'll be showing this before the election. It's the first day of school, and Happy New Year, and we have a teacher in the family, so we've gone through the motions and all the challenges this year. Hey, so tell us about yourself, your connection to Peterborough-Kawartha riding, and why you want to be our Member of Parliament. Tell us what brought you to Peterborough,
Absolutely.
How long you've been here, a little bit about yourself.
Well, you mentioned first day of school, and you know, family is a big part of my life, and my partner and I just took our daughter Matilda, who's 11, to Prince of Wales this morning. So we certainly appreciate this particular city. For one, it's beautiful, and it's rich culturally and artistically, and its natural beauty and the trails are just so appealing. So I have had a residence not too far from here for the last 18 years, and we just really wanted to consolidate our lives here. So we bought a home here about a year ago, and I have always been active in my community, as well in political life, as well as just community nonprofit organizations, activism. And it's the first thing I wanted to do was to engage and get involved.
So the move came first, and then the decision to get involved in politics? Locally?
Again, I've been on the EDFO provincial executive, but I've also been a local released elected leader for a number of years, since 2015. So politics has always been part of my life in my more recent decade. But I definitely felt that my experience and my advocacy skills and my public education, public health, there's so much intersection right now in terms of needs and issues related to the pandemic that I felt really called to and drawn to in terms of contributing everything I could. This is my way of serving with all my heart, connected to the time that we're living in that we didn't expect. Because I care about the planet, because I care about my child and her children, and having a place where we can all be fruitful and grow together after this pandemic is over. And we have a lot of work to do to get there. I'm excited to be with the party that has a plan and a vision and a strategy to do that. So it's a thrill to be a candidate.
Now, is this the first time you've run provincially or for anything other outside of the teachers?
The education sector?
Education sector?
I have worked on a number of campaigns for the NDP over the years. In the last federal election, I canvassed and was on the campaign team in Toronto Danforth. I've worked in municipal elections, trustee elections in my life. I love the political process, and I love democracy. And all our voices need to be heard, and that's what's so exciting about an election. So it is indeed my first federal run. Matthew Green from Toronto Centre, who is an amazing MP in Ottawa, encouraged me to run in 2019. And at that time, I was president of the Elementary Teachers of Toronto and was fighting against the cuts to education. So for me, it wasn't the right time, but I thought in the future, I would really like to do this. So it's just a tremendous opportunity for me, and I'm so thrilled to be able to serve in this way and just to have the experience of being in a federal campaign. And whatever happens, I'll continue to fight and do the good work that we need to have happen in our community.
Well, that's great. And you're, long-time connections north of here to the community and being in the community and jumping right in, maybe sooner than you'd hoped. Things happen pretty quickly. Tell us what you're most passionate about in your party's national platform, which ironically is the Green New Deal, I believe. That was originally what came out. What are you most passionate about what your leader is going to lead your party doing if you should be elected?
So you raised the Green New Deal and climate action, and I certainly believe that is so pivotal and is on everybody's minds right now. We're watching New York City subways be engulfed with water, whole streets, just the water level rising and boats in the streets. It's unbelievable. In Lytton, the wildfires raging all the way, north of Superior. It's in our province. So there's no time to waste. We listen to our youth. We have a heart for our youth because we know that what they're facing. We've had a government for 6 years who's talked about climate action, but we're the one G7 country that is most behind. And in fact, our emissions have gone up in the last 6 years under the Trudeau government. It's time for a change. There have been lots of promises, but we need to know that our government means it. And certainly the NDP means action when we talk about a just transition and a swift transition to a green economy, to clean energy sources, and to absolutely reducing our carbon footprint and meeting those targets before it becomes a catastrophe, with mechanisms in place to make sure it happens. We want to create good jobs at the same time. We want to retrain, we want to retrofit the buildings we have in Peterborough-Kawartha, where perhaps we have factories that have left. Let's make new industries that are clean, green, and have a hope for the future. We can create those jobs and build the economy so we can catch up with Germany and Iceland and Denmark and the Netherlands. We're behind and we need to catch up.
So on the national front, and you mentioned some examples of the impacts of climate change, but on the local front, aside from climate change, what do you think is the most pressing issue that a federal leader, an MP, can have some impact on here in the Peterborough area?
Absolutely, and thanks for that question. I mentioned it earlier, as an educator, the Truth and Reconciliation report and our calls to action a number of years ago have resulted in 13 of 94 of those calls to action be addressed. That is far too long and it's far too late. And we need to be addressing not only the 31 reserves that continue to have unclean water running from their taps, but also we need to make sure that we have equity in education, in First Nations reserves, as well as in the urban Indigenous school settings, where students are attending public schools and are Indigenous. There is a funding problem, and it's existed since the Harris years. We need a new funding formula provincially, and we need a federal government who will recognize the importance of leadership federally when we're dispersing transfer payments to provinces in a fourth wave of a pandemic. We need to know where that money's going, and we need to know that money's going to be spent on the right things. We need to spend money on our Indigenous communities and to be true to our profession of equity and that relationship being the most important thing. There have been lots of promises made, but they need to be kept. Jagmeet Singh is going to do that.
Great. Hey, now I'm going to shift gears a bit here and just ask you about, obviously, since you were nominated as a candidate, you're getting out, getting people to know you and doing interviews, and when the nomination meeting happened, and
yes,
people go, "Oh, who's Joy Latika?" But tell us something about yourself that we might not know.
Okay. I like to tell the story of my family. I was born abroad. My father was from the Philippines, and I immigrated to Canada from the Philippines as a very young child. And it was an interesting growing up experience. I grew up in a small railroad town of 2,000, and I was the only racialized child. So I know what it is to be different than everybody else, and I recognize just what it's like to be made fun of, and racial slurs, and to have sand kicked in my face and things like that. So it's a real struggle across this country, and we know that there are issues of racism in different corners, and also just the intersectional issues that we all face. I'm a proud member of the 2S LGBTQ community and a proud parent. And there's so many, and an artist. I have an arts background as well. We need to make sure that we're supporting our communities, and I just really feel that was an experience that I had, and I had a single mom for a good deal of my childhood who'd had difficulty around childcare, and we didn't always have family to rely on. So I can feel, and we feel, how difficult it is for single parents in a pandemic that do not have access to affordable childcare. And that's because I was a latchkey kid and had to make my own Kraft dinner at lunch when I was in grade 4. It's not easy. So we feel for all those families, and childhood can be a struggle, but we get through, and then we want to give back as we're older, and we can reflect on some of those things.
Well, I asked you tell us something about yourself. You've filled us in with a lot of information, and it's great to know that, because that's what this is all about, learning more about you. And,
yes.
And thank you for sharing that. You're going door to door. What are people saying? What's the big issues you're hearing when you're at the doorstep?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. A lot of people are saying that they're concerned about this September. There are a lot of families in Peterborough-Kawartha, and they're answering the door, and they're wanting to talk about that. And how can we be sure that we'll be safe? And certainly, we talk about how vaccines are important, that we need to be as safe as possible. And we're proud that the NDP stands very firmly on that, and in fact all the leaders do. We need to be supporting our healthcare workers. At the door, we're talking about the climate emergency. It's a big deal, and people are concerned for the planet. And we're also talking about affordable housing, because a lot of folks are having challenges making ends meet. The homeless issue is a big problem. We know that so many in our communities are needing mental health supports. And we know that there's an addiction issue in this city that is twice what it is in other jurisdictions in Canada. So we need to address those things and bring the supports and resources into Peterborough-Kawartha, so that we can really bring people forward, bring people up, and leave no one behind.
Okay. Now, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you, why do you think, and you might have alluded to this earlier, your leader, Jagmeet Singh, is the best person to be our next Prime Minister?
He's the real thing, in that I know that he is authentic, that he has had his own struggles in life, and he can speak to them with resonance and with authenticity, and with a sense of compassion that comes forth for those who struggle, for those who are left behind. And he really means business when we think about policy, action, strategy to lift people up. And if there's a will, there's a way, and I certainly am confident that a leader like Jagmeet will bring things forward in terms of follow-through and promises being kept.
Okay. One last question. We can probably figure it out from some of your earlier answers. If you're not elected, what's the next chapter in your life when it comes to community engagement? We do have about 15 seconds. So.
It'll be a big exhale, because it's been tremendously busy, but I certainly will be going back to work, because I've taken a leave of absence, and I'll be fighting for families and community, and continuing to engage deeply in this community, because it's my home and I love it very much.
Joy Lachika, thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing some of your insights. We wish you all the best on the campaign trail, and be safe, and we'll see you on our debate. Welcome to Your Vote on YourTV. We're doing a series of interviews with candidates in Peterborough-Kawartha riding. It's my pleasure to welcome the current MP for the Peterborough-Kawartha riding, into our remote studio. Miriam Monsef, great to have you here, back on TV.
It's good to be back, and it's good to be back in this building. I ran my first 2 campaigns out of here.
Oh, I did not know that. Well, we're doing some renos at our studio. We have a little more space here, so we're really glad. I know you had to come all the way across George Street to get here from your campaign office, so we figured you might find some time. But Miriam, you're currently the Member of Parliament for Peterborough-Kawartha, the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Rural Economic Development. The Liberal Party is running under the Forward for Everyone campaign, and you have a platform. I understand all parties now have a platform, which hasn't been the case until recently. But tell us something about yourself. You've made great inroads here. You've represented Peterborough. You've been on the front page of the New York Times with certain people at certain summits. So certainly people know who you are. But is there anything about running again in this election? Many of your colleagues have decided to retire. Now you're young and relatively new, but many of your colleagues have decided not to run, whether they decided a year ago or recently. But why do you want to continue to be the MP for Peterborough-Kawartha?
Thanks, Jay, and I appreciate you doing this. This is an important election. It's an important choice folks are about to make. And I'm running because this community saved my life. This community helped my family when we had nowhere else to go. This community took us in and gave us a second shot at life, and I ran in the first place to give back, and I'm not done giving back. Over the past 6 years, together as a community with federal investments, we've been able to create and retain more than 3,000 jobs in Peterborough-Kawartha. We've lifted people out of poverty. We've created opportunity for young people, and we've done more to support those without a place to call home. The train is going to make a stop along this community. We've supported the airport. We're improving the Trent Severn waterway, and during COVID, our government had your back. And you mentioned other parties. The Liberal Party of Canada is the only party this election that's offered Canadians a fully costed plan to move us forward, to finish the fight against the pandemic, to make life more affordable, to fight climate change, and create jobs in that process. And this community deserves the strongest voice at the table. And this community, as hard hit as we are, we've got a lot of possibilities ahead of us. And with the Liberal plan, with me as your representative, we can move forward. So I'm running, and I really hope that the community continues to put their trust in me and lets me be your voice in Parliament, because you mentioned the meeting with Mr. Trump and the work that we've been able to do for the community. At the end of the day, every single day, this has been a labor of love, and Peterborough is the center of my universe. So that's what this is all about.
Miriam, let's build on that a bit, because one of the challenges, and we've seen that with other elected officials at the provincial, federal level, when they get elevated, and you were elevated right away to a cabinet post, comes great opportunities, but great challenges. How do you balance being the best constituent representative with being, and you've got a couple of portfolios, rural development isn't a small one, and certainly women and gender equality is critical. How do you balance the responsibilities of those national issues with looking out for smaller issues, I guess, or things that are important to people along with that here in Peterborough-Kawartha?
The short answer is knowing who I am, and I'm from Peterborough. This is my home. This is the only place I've ever felt safe in. So it's the center of every conversation, every program, every decision. And my team. I have the best team anybody could ask for. And during the pandemic, it was the team here in Peterborough-Kawartha from their homes, responding to 2,000 to 3,000 calls and requests for help per month. And this team isn't just in it to be in it. My team is in it for all the right reasons, and they're in it to give the community the best shot at a decent future. And so, the short answer is, and I said this to the Prime Minister too, when he asked me to be part of his cabinet, and I was having imposter syndrome, and he said, well, don't you think that your community deserves to have a voice around the big girls and boys table Don't you think that the pain and the poverty and the possibilities you see for your community can be achieved better if you were around the cabinet table? And he's held me to that since that very day. And so if there's a high-speed internet plan to move every rural household into 5010 or higher, Peterborough and the voice of folks in Peterborough-Kawartha has shaped it. If we have a plan to close the gender pay gap and get women into the workforce and make sure they're not stuck in violent homes, it's because Peterborough's taught me that way. If our climate plan or housing plan has a smart, sensible approach to it, people in Peterborough-Kawartha have shaped it. So they've never been different things. It's always been about Peterborough, and it will remain so. It's my North Star, if you will.
Okay, well, that leads into my next two questions. But the first one, and it's a bit of a difficult question. What national issue are you most passionate about? And it might be a leading question given your role, but I'm going to ask you that anyways.
First and foremost, Jay, finish the fight against the pandemic. Our vaccination rates are high, but we're not yet through. The public health work that took place, we got to beef up those systems. I started a mental health advocacy group at Trent 13 years ago. Because of the stigma associated with mental illness, so few people went out and got the help they need. And post-pandemic, people are hurting, right? And if I can say what the kids say, we're all over COVID. We're all over it. But the pandemic is not yet over. And in its wake, it's left people depressed, anxious, isolated. And so nationally, our support for mental health and the evidence-based, compassionate measures we're putting in place to address addictions and the opioids crisis, that's like the personal stuff for me. But like, finish the fight against the pandemic, make life more affordable. High-speed internet matters, and so does affordable housing, getting that first home, and $10 a day childcare. And none of us are gonna be okay if we don't respond to the climate emergency in a smart, thoughtful way. And the party I'm running with has the best plan for our community and for our country.
And out of those issues, which one do you see needing the most support and help besides the pandemic? But what issue locally in the riding do you think needs the most attention right now?
Well, our government responded well to the pandemic, right? It's in good hands. It was an unprecedented crisis, and the steady hand required is what we offer. We can move our communities out of the pandemic and get us going onto a path for recovery. Locally, for young people particularly, and you probably remember them, last election they were flooding the streets and demanding climate action, a credible plan that gets us to net zero by 2050, that creates jobs in the process, that keeps the country whole. That's a big deal. We saw what one tiny species, one virus that we can't see with our eyes. We saw the kind of havoc it can wreak in our communities and for our economy. The climate emergency is here. We don't have time to debate it, and we have to act. And if we act now and build on the work that we've already implemented over the past 6 years, Canada can be a leader globally and create green jobs in the process. But if we stop now, from discovery science to clean air to clean water to protecting our species at risk, the rest of the world, particularly our American neighbors, are going to win this race, and we'll be left dealing with disaster and crisis after crisis. Are
you satisfied with what your government's done? Do you wish you could have done more? Are there other things that could have happened? That's what people say. Well, they've said they're going to do this. This hasn't happened. But how do you feel that can be achieved in this next term should you be re-elected as the governing party?
Are we talking about the climate
emergency?
emergency?
The climate emergency, yeah.
We put a price on pollution. We gave the proceeds back to folks here, and we created green jobs in the process. We were taken to court by provinces who did not want us to put a price on pollution. So yes, we could have done more, but we had to bring provinces along who did not want to play ball. $10 a day childcare. This is something that women have been asking for 50 years. And 15 years ago, This was on the table. Agreements were signed with provinces and territories. And when the NDP decided to partner with Mr. Harper and tear that plan up, they changed the trajectory of a generation of kids and parents, not for better. And so what I'm hoping we can finish beyond the fight against the pandemic is getting that $10 a day childcare, because here in our community, that's gonna mean parents save up to $12,000 a year per child. Imagine what our families could do with that. Imagine what will happen to our economy. And you know, if you're asking me wistfully, what do I regret? What do I wish we could do better? During the pandemic, Jay, if I could go back, I would spend less time hunched over my laptop in my basement. I would spend more time outside. I would eat fewer carbs, and I would definitely be nicer to my family who had to deal with me in crisis management mode. So those are things that, with us vaccinated, with life starting to return to normal, is hopefully the beginning of a brighter future, a more resilient future for our community and our country.
Right, and it does, we're early September, it does feel like the new year already as we get moving and get back on track. So you've been under the spotlight for many years now with your political life, but tell us something we might not know about you that hasn't come out in your campaign literature or hasn't been reported on, or something you might be interested in that, something new we could, and that's why I'm going on a bit so you have time to answer this, and I'm doing this with all candidates. Okay. So, but tell us something we might not know about Mariam Monsaf.
Well, let's see. I got engaged, and that was on broadcast, so you know about Matt. And I spent okay, here's something you don't know. I spent over 500 days in my mother's basement during the pandemic, sleeping and working in the same space, 18 hours a day. And you know, for anybody who's got a less than reliable internet connection, I want you to know that I feel you. I spent, honestly, 40% of my day in tech glitches, and thank God for my team, because they do their best to solve it. But I've got these gray hairs I didn't have before, and I blame those tech glitches and all those hours in my mother's basement.
Yeah, well, you might as well blame it on that. So, well, that's good to know, and I appreciate you sharing that.
You asked.
I did, and thank you for that.
I'll think of more. I'm sure
No,
there's
that's
more.
perfect. Tell us what people are saying at the doorstep. You're knocking on doors. You've had Chrystia Freeland, I think, was here, the Deputy Prime Minister. What are people saying to you as you're going door to door in Peterborough-Kawartha?
People are over COVID, and they're ready to put it behind us, but we are not yet done with the fight. And so when I was at the door with Chrystia Freeland last week, you know, if we were knocking on the door of a young family, we knocked on Tara's door. Tara has 3 kids, young kids. Tara is also a nurse on the front lines of the fight against the pandemic, and she had to pay for childcare, which she wanted to spend on home renovation to give her more space. We're knocking on doors, and people are concerned about addictions and the mental illness reality that so many of us face. And so our plan to make sure everybody has access to primary care, to give incentives to doctors and pharmacists and teachers to get settled in rural communities by giving them debt relief seems to resonate. People are talking to us about making life more affordable. And so if it's a younger family, they keep saying we're having a hard time saving for our down payment. The way the bidding process works in trying to buy your first home, there's blind bidding, there isn't any transparency, and so we get outbid and we get degree after degree, but we can't afford to buy these homes because so many folks are coming in and sight unseen are buying these homes. And you know, the big existential crisis of our time, climate change, comes up a lot, and this community cared about it in 2014, in 2015, in 2019, but as I said, having seen what a pandemic can do, the disruption it causes, the hurt it's left everyone with, I think people are even more aware of what this emergency could mean if not responded to. People are anxious, people are depressed, and I'd say even a little cranky because life has been hard. They've had to stay home and to make the toughest sacrifice, which is being away from your loved ones and not going about your day to day in the same way. And the piece that's made them the most cranky is watching folks who don't believe in science, who don't care about their neighbors, create such a fuss about vaccination and masking. So the community has been through a lot. No matter how good you have it in life, people have been through a lot. But they're ready to move forward, and thanks to this incredible team I have, the response has been positive, and hopefully at advanced polls this weekend, on E-Day on September 20th, I really hope they put an X next to my name because it has been the privilege of a lifetime to serve this community, particularly in their hour of need.
Miriam, on that note, we have to end it. We're out of time. I'm not out of questions, but we got a lot of them answered. So thank you so much for joining us here on Your Vote, and wish you all the best on the campaign trail. And stay safe, and we'll see you down the road, I'm sure.
Oh, we'll see you again, Jay. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Welcome to Your Vote on YourTV. I'm Jay Amer. We're speaking today with Michelle Ferrari, the candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada. Welcome to our impromptu studio.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, Michelle, you're a social media influencer, a vlogger. I'll ask you what that is later, and a former TV broadcaster, and you're no stranger to YourTV and its predecessors. You've worked in the industry, so I hope you can help me along with this interview if we get caught up in anything.
Sure.
But people would know you from your past career. You've had a pretty high profile in the community and certainly online as a vlogger, and you know, made an impression on people. So you are someone that people are aware of in the community. But tell us a bit about yourself, your connections to the Peterborough community, and why you want to be our next Member of Parliament.
Well, thanks, Jay. Yeah, so a lot of people might know me as Michelle Leahy. So originally from Douro, born and raised here. And went to school here, went to Trent University here, and worked here. Obviously, like you mentioned, business owner, which I prefer over influencer personally. But
I think I read that somewhere.
We'll get into that later if you want. Yeah, communication specialist as well, and working with people all over the world. In terms of why I wanted to become Member of Parliament, you know, it's really a service. It's not a job. It's more like a calling. This is not like some fun, yay kind of thing. It's really a passion to serve people and to make a difference. So anybody who really does this, I think that's why they do this. For me, personally, I've been dedicating my life to raising awareness about a lot of issues and being a voice for people and being that kind of bridge to deliver messages that some people may be not able to do, being a voice for people. And so mental health is a really big component of what I want to do in this region, supporting small businesses and the economy. And I've often made a joke that misery is a great motivator. So when you're really unhappy, that's usually when things motivate you to make a change, right? If you're not part of the solution, you're often part of the problem. And so I often, you know, obviously wanted to do something to make a difference.
So with your campaign, and we've been running shows like this for the last 10 years since I've been involved, but tell us a bit about who's behind the scenes, your campaign manager, some of the key members of your team that are hoping to get you elected.
Great question. Definitely couldn't be doing it without them. So they bring a lot of wealth and experience here. Mike Skinner is my campaign manager, so a lot of people might know Mike. He was a former candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada, so he's incredible. We have a lot of amazing people helping behind the scenes, and you know, my partner Ryan Moore is critical as well. There's a whole wealth of people who have the experience and wherewithal that have worked on campaigns and are out there, you know, doing the work, and that's really what it is. It's the motivation behind getting this done is the people who are out there working day in and day out, volunteering their time to do this.
So what compelled you to get involved with the Conservative Party of Canada? You come from this community, a rural area, that might be one hint, but you know, there's other parts of your background people might think you'd be supportive of another type party. What got you, and what did you find most intriguing about the Conservative Party to allow you to want to step up and do this?
I think that's a great question, and I think there still is a unfortunate stigma attached to Conservatives, and I think for me, conservatism is autonomy, it's self-governance, it's you know, having an environment that allows you to be successful. I had a kid at the door ask me this question. I think it's always great. Kids ask the most pointed questions. They're great. I wish more kids actually were involved in politics. He said,
or could vote, yeah.
Yeah, right? They're great because they just say it like it is. And I tried to explain, he said, what is a conservative to you? And I thought, okay, how am I going to explain this? He was in about grade 3 or 4. I said, to me, conservatism is like we represent, the government should, according to conservatives, should be like your teacher and your parents. We need to give you the tools and the resources to do your homework, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to do your homework. And that's really how I live my life. As a business owner, you know, the government is there to facilitate and create an environment for success, but not to dictate how you live your life, how your money is spent, or what you do. So there's a lot of autonomy and self-governance that I really love about conservatism. The other aspect is service, right? You serve because it's the right thing to do. And that's what a lot of conservatives do, including myself.
Okay. Your party has announced its platform, Canada's Recovery Plan. What issue in that plan are you most passionate about?
Easy. Mental health. Number 3. Mental health is, you know, when we look at recovery and we look at economic growth, stabilizing the economy, the cost of living, all of these things, they all dovetail to mental health. And I don't know a person out there that can't say that if they don't have their mental health in check, and if things aren't okay, run in here. It doesn't matter. You can't go to work. You can't be a productive member. You need to be taking care of your mental health. We need to change how we talk about it, and we need to change how we treat it.
And also on the local level, and I'm assuming that we could concur that's probably a challenge here, but if it wasn't that issue, what would be the most pressing issue on the local Peterborough-Kawartha?
Yeah, this is a big one. So I think it all comes down to an umbrella of cost of living. That's the one thing that really impacts every single person, regardless at that door, right? So groceries, hydro, housing, gas, those are things that don't allow us, if that's too high, I mean, that's your mental health. It just kind of crushes it, right? There's no other greater stress than laying in bed worrying if you're going to be able to feed yourself, your kids, your family, make ends meet. So the cost of living is at an all-time high, and we need to get that under control.
I'm going to ask you, change gears for a minute here, and just ask you, obviously, you know, you've had a profile in the community and beyond, actually, and on YouTube and other places, but is there anything you can tell us about yourself that our audience might not know that you'd like to share? Is there, you know, just
I'd like to share
an
is the
interest?
key.
I just put that in there, yeah. But
you know what? A lot of people don't know I was a teacher. A lot of people don't know that I was going to be a funeral director and worked in a funeral home. A lot of people don't know that I worked with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Fisheries, Wildlife, Biodiversity Lab. A lot of people don't know I skipped grade 8. That's kind of a fun little
You can
fact.
do that?
Yeah, I did that. I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, I mean, I am educated, and I think a lot of people don't know that. I think what gets lost sometimes is that words, she's just a social media influencer, she's just a vlogger. I created a business from nothing. I created a business from the ground up, and a model that has been copied throughout North America for what I created.
you know, and I stole that title from one of the newspaper articles in trying to describe what you are. But you make a good point, and it's not to denigrate it, but you know, you're not just that. It is the new world of marketing. So, but how long? When did you start that business?
2015.
And so was that was, I guess, a bit ahead of the game, or 2021
Yeah,
now?
timing's everything, right? As we know in the world. It was kind of funny. One person thought they were really giving me an insult, and they called me Kim Kardashian online, which I was like, well, she's probably one of the most wealthy and brilliant business minds of the world. Yeah, so at the time, it really was about finding something that would cater to my skill set, which is really learning from people and solving problems and listening to people, but then how do you monetize that? And how do you create something sustainable for your family? And so, you know, when the internet came out and online marketing and social media marketing, you know, people really were critical of me at the time. People thought I was crazy. You know, I walked away from a television job and people said, why, what are you doing? And, you know, I was told that I had made the biggest mistake of my life, and I was able to generate over 600% growth in my business in just 2.5 years, and was speaking on a world stage shortly thereafter. So yeah, there is a business model there, and there is a lot that goes into making it happen.
So you mentioned doorstep, one kid's question, but what are other people saying? What's the big issue that people are talking to you about when you're going door to door? And what's that reception been like?
They're mad. They're mad that an election was called. They're frustrated with the current government. They're disillusioned with politics. They want honesty. They want accountability. They want integrity. They want somebody who brings people together and unites people, not divides them or shames them. People are angry.
Yeah, are you doing a lot of door knocking? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and not in these shoes.
That's probably a good thing. Yeah, that's a good lesson for anybody in politics. Hey, tell us why you think Aaron O'Toole would be the best choice to be Canada's next Prime Minister.
Love this question. Thank you. Aaron O'Toole is what I think we need right now. And his service in the military speaks volumes to what I personally believe. So when I worked with Checks Television, I was the Canadian Forces correspondent. And I got an inside look. I never had been in a military family. It was astounding to me to learn the culture and the type of person that it attracts. And Aaron O'Toole is a Canadian Forces member. He served for 12 years. They have a results-driven service intention mind that I think is critical for leadership and action, right? Not just words, but action. The other aspect that I think is really great about Aaron is he's a lawyer. So I think when we look at policy and we're writing really good policy, it's really the law. And so having somebody who knows that law and the ethical side of it is critical. And the third thing that I really love about Aaron is that his family is from here, and that I've had the opportunity to have his dad working at our office, and they're just family people, and that they're from here, and that means a lot to me, of that sort of essence of family.
Right, yeah, his dad being John O'Toole, the former MPP, went to former PCVS up the road here, I believe. So with Aaron O'Toole, and it's interesting, he's running in Durham riding. I was just down there the other day and saw the signs, but he's spending a lot of time in BC, Quebec, Ottawa. Has he had a chance to interact with you? Has there been any kind of support for your running? And I know he's got lots of candidates, but tell us about your relationship with the leader and.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, he's been really amazing. I got to meet him right after I won the nomination. I went to an event with him where we announced our rural campaign to get, rural ridings connected through broadband, affordable internet and cell service by 2025. And it was kind of funny because it was my first time meeting him. And so I had my phone, and I do a lot of live videos. So I thought, okay, this is going to be it. Maybe I'm going to get cut off because, it's going to have to be approved and all of these things. And so I kind of held up my phone. I said, it's really great to meet you, Aaron. And I said, can I do a video? And he goes, you can do whatever you want, Michelle. You've created an environment with the people in your community. They trust you. And as a result, I trust you back. And so I really love that type of leadership of making sure that people have what they need, but feeling supported at the same time. And if I do need any support, he's absolutely there. But I've been really impressed with how he's led the candidates so far.
So
led the candidates, not leaded. That's a weird one.
So if you're elected, if your party forms government, and this is a question I've asked candidates before, and we've got some time, so I'm going to ask you. What portfolio would you be interested in if you were considered for a cabinet post?
I've never actually thought about that, to be honest. People make fun of me because they say, what are you going to do when? I've really lived my life by a rule of do the work, one step in front of the other, do the work. Do the work, And until you cross the finish line, don't worry about that. Right now, what you need to focus on is getting the work done. And that's how things happen. You do the work, you knock on the door, you take one step at a time, and you listen to people, and you listen to what they want, and you let the doors open that may, and you just do the work, and you get it done.
Now, I want to just circle back and sort of ask a more broad-based general question, but if you're speaking to our audience within the YourTV purview, what would you tell them to convince them you would be the best MP for Peterborough-Kawartha?
Thank you for that question. I think the position is customer service. I really believe at the end of the day, it's about responsive action. And I think an MP really should be there when you need them. And I think it is their job to relay your voice to Ottawa, not for you to bring Ottawa's voice to them. And to know what they're doing, to be actively involved, to not show up when it's convenient for you, to actually be doing the work and showing up to all of these beautiful little hubs. Like we have this huge geographical region, you know, all the way from Cordova Mines up to almost Kinmount, right, on Crystal Lake Road. We have a huge geographical region. All of these people matter. And so we need to effectively be listening to all of these people. What do they need? How do we unite them? Communication at the end of it is leadership, right? And being connected and being available and answering the phone when someone calls, returning emails, but also having the insight to solve problems. A lot of it is network, right? So that's what I've had to do in my business. It's a matter of you've built up so many relationships, positive relationships. And so when somebody has an issue that they need solved, if you have those good positive relationships, sometimes it's a phone call, an email, a text, and you can connect them to the right person and get that work done so efficiently because you've already built up the relationships, which I've done because I'm from here.
Michelle, on that note, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank you for sharing some of your insights and your reasons for being involved in this election. And I wish you all the best on the campaign trail and stay safe. And we will see you again, I'm sure. And I want to thank our audience for joining us here on Your Vote.